Hello, everybody. How are you? Welcome. I see David is on the line here somewhere. David, I'm
I'm
unmuting
here.
you. There you are. Fantastic.
Yes. Am I muted or am I?
You are
You can hear
unmuted.
me.
I can hear you, and I'm presuming everybody else can as well.
Excellent.
Fantastic. 12 on the dot. You are right on time. Amazing.
I'm always amazed when my computer works.
Yes, well, aren't we all this day and age? We'll get going here. We've got 20 plus people on the line, which is great. I'm sure more will be joining as we continue our conversation. Just to get started, my name is Jonathan Neal. I am the director of the Center for Business and Management of the Arts at Claremont Graduate University. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague. I hope I can call you a friend at this point, David.
Absolutely.
Who is David Pagel, who is, amongst other things, a fellow faculty member in the Department of Art at Claremont Graduate University, but also importantly, a curator and a critic for the Los Angeles Times and for other journals and for other newspapers and other outlets, far ranging and wide in their scope. And so, David, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to. Thanks for asking.
As with all of these conversations, at least most of them, I like to ask straight out, how are you doing? How is life in quarantine for you?
So far, so good. And I kind of rebound or ping pong from being completely absorbed in what I'm doing and forgetting about the rest of the world, to jolting out of that and thinking, oh my God, when will it end? How will life be different? What does the future look like for my kids?
Right. Are your kids are at home and doing school from home, I'm assuming?
Yep, we're like laboratory rats trapped in a cage, coming close to gnawing each other's limbs off, but still not quite there yet.
Well, it's something like that around my household as well. You were going to say something else. Sorry, you froze up.
One big upside is the no commuting. I didn't realize how many hours I was spending in my car every week. So suddenly 4 days feel like 26 or 27 hours. So that's one upside of it all. The downside is preparing so many Zoom meeting links.
That seems to be, that's a new skill that I never thought I would develop any expertise at. So let's talk about a couple things. How is this affecting the LA Times? How has it affected your work as a critic?
In one sense, it stopped it completely and absolutely, because as a critic for the newspaper, my job is to go out and see exhibitions, and we do that, in a car and then in the flesh, face to face, either looking at a painting, walking around a sculpture, during a video, engaging anything at all, sound, and everything. And with every gallery being closed, I don't have a job as a reviewer to go out and see the stuff. And to me, I've always been a huge, to me, I would never, ever write a review of a show I didn't see. To me, it's just fundamental to the experience of a work of art that you have to experience it before you can say anything about it. So I was really kind of surprised or shocked that Roberta Smith covered a show she saw online in the paper last week. She was upfront about it and said, I didn't see it. It's here. But to me, it's like, I've been, whenever I rent something on Airbnb, it's never like it looks like, it's always better online than it is in flesh. Well, not always, but often. And I don't see how you can be a critic in the old sense of being a critic by reviewing things online. To me, it's a little bit like, reading a menu and thinking you're getting a meal.
But I mean, there is a type of experience. I mean, would it be possible for something like video or some other work, photography of a sort that's inherently mediated or has a different way of trafficking in the world, that you can gain access to some of what it provides, perhaps not the exact thing that would be intended?
Yeah, I'll just say, I had to shut my window because there's noise outside. Oh yeah, I mean, so what I meant to say, Jonathan, is that it's like the way we had practiced criticism, or the way I had practiced criticism, changes now. But I don't and I think that the way people communicate is changing now. And I don't mean to suggest that, like, oh, now criticism is over, or maybe that kind of criticism is on pause for a while. But I still think meaningful communication happens, and it happens in lots and lots of different ways. And I basically look at all forms of art as types of communication. And that now we're going to still keep communicating. It's going to be different in the same way that me talking to you by phone is one type of communication. Me talking to you like we are right now is another kind. Me talking to you face to face is another kind. And each of those have different types of meaning. I enjoy face to face communication because you can, there aren't these little delays that make everything seem strange and that's kind of robotic and stuttery. But there's also, other kinds of body language that one can pick up. And it's just like, it's really, really different. And it's like, going to say a football game or a soccer game or a basketball game live is one thing. Watching on TV is another thing. I mean, there's nothing like being in the crowd, but there's also nothing like getting that, really close view from TV. And there's all different sorts of experiences. And I think we're going through a big shift in them, but I think there's just, humans.
Oh no, I lost that last little bit. Sorry, that we're experiencing the faults of this medium.
Yeah, that there's still an infinite number of ways for meaning to be conveyed meaningfully.
Yeah.
And they're different now.
So, I mean, this is a line of conversation that I kind of want to dig into a little bit deeper. I mean, to the extent that you've had a little bit of time, I think we're 3 or 4 weeks into our full kind of stay at home lifestyles. I'm going to assume that you've had a chance to do some writing in the interim while you've been doing it. Have you noticed any changes? And maybe too soon, that may be an unfair question, but have you noticed a kind of any subtle shifts, any differences in what it is that you're finding that you're writing about, or how you're writing about, or things that have become more prominent or less prominent as you've been doing it?
Become more aware of the fragility and vulnerability of culture and the human species. It's like big stuff like that, and just like how kind of magical and wonderful it was when you'd have these like just unselfconscious gatherings of people where you just like all be in a room arguing about something, and I just took it for granted. That's like my whole life, that's what we did. And now suddenly, when that's just not happening right now, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. I imagine we'll go back towards something like that, but I have a pretty overactive imagination, and I think like, oh, if this is one level of it, what's the next one? Are we each going to have a little bubble or a glass ball we're in and only communicating digitally? So I'm kind of like in a sci-fi way aware of just the kind of the the magical wonder of like humanity and culture and how it can disappear, and one atom splitting and a lot of it's gone, or one bug spreading and it's radically transformed. So I mean, personally, that's in the background. I don't know if that's made me a more sensitive or perceptive critic, maybe, but I think it's too soon to tell, to kind of set my default patterns of
Yeah. I mean, it's a terribly unfair question, given that it's only been 3 or 4 weeks. So it's not even time for reflection, or or what the historians will be able to dig up, or the literary critics will be able to dig up in the future. But so bringing it a little bit more to our region and our city, what concerns you most about our sort of new landscape of fragility? What are you sort of most worried about? And alternatively, what are you if it's possible, what are you most enthusiastic about or optimistic about?
I'll start with the optimism and the enthusiasm, because that's actually the way my head went with this thing. And it started, I started thinking about years ago, where there was this kind of idea of underground art and being in an underground and being like below the radar of commercial culture or official culture or recognized culture or pop culture. And to me, a lot of artists really wanted to go there because it was a space of freedom and apartness and kind of not being recognized or not being acknowledged. And that was like where the good stuff happened. And that's, to me, that we've shifted away from that as a culture over the last 20 years, which is like this, incredible accessibility of I can be in, 20, 30 people's rooms right now. There's so much, like, to me, the underground has disappeared, and people would be like, they don't care about doing anything unless it gets recognized. And I would kind of grow up with cultures like, you wanted to not be noticed so you could get away with what you cared with. So I was thinking that maybe with all of this, there might be more underground stuff going on, like secret meetings, illicit meetings, things you're not supposed,
right,
illegal ones that might be bad for everyone, or just like private ones that aren't all about publicity. I don't know if that'll happen, but I am concerned about this like kind of disappearance of interior life and reflection and privacy, and this kind of like cult of transparency and full disclosure and I need everyone to see every selfie I ever took attitude.
or now also the extent that even by dint of our doing these things, these are sort of inherent views into our intimate interior lives when we now are getting together, right? There's a deeper sense of transparency or openness that comes even as we are separated from one another and we don't meet on neutral territories.
Yeah, you can see, like, I love seeing everyone's background, for one thing.
And their kids and their pets who like make cameo appearances amongst these conversations.
Yeah, like I didn't know he had 42 cats living with him.
tells you a lot about somebody. The idea of the underground is actually pretty interesting. And in this environment, though, it's sort of curious because I think of that illicit behavior as almost as like now illicit gatherings, which are basically just like any gatherings during a quarantine, right? Like any attempt to gather at all and exercise this thing that's otherwise a right that's sort of enshrined, in our culture at least, itself becomes a kind of taboo. And I think that the other thing that brings to mind is that there's so much, a lot of artistic practice, and you know this better than anybody, a lot of artistic practice has moved in the direction of the social, right? Since the 1990s, in a kind of not a vulgar or crass way, but in a sort of naive way, and has become increasingly more sophisticated since.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on the sort of how this condition redefines that idea of the social and redefines or reconceptualizes what it means to engage in the public or the social sphere, either as a ground or as a medium?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question, and I've been thinking about it a little bit. And to me, in a way, the coronavirus exacerbates what had been going on about increasing isolation, increasing amount on screen time, increasing digital access to what when I was in college they called the real, and I think this just like kind of amplifies it and intensifies it and multiplies it tenfold, hundredfold. So it could just go way more, but it actually, to me, it also may push it so hard that people actually start to miss each other and want that. I think that actually had been building. Talking to a lot of like college presidents and college provosts at undergraduate institutions, they've been kind of really worried about their incoming freshmen being unable to do a seminar because they're in a room with 12 other bodies that are functioning and looking at it. And they say, and the kind of attentiveness that these collegiate leaders were talking about, it was like this inability to focus on lots of different people at once and only be able to do one thing at a time. And to me, that was like there's something wonderful about a dinner party where the 8, 10, 12 people sitting at a table are all involved in the same conversation. And I remember those dinner parties the most fun, where you would actually be calm enough and mature enough and restrained enough and patient enough to fall into a rhythm of talking with a group. And I, maybe it's just my peer group, but I have lately, or like the last 10 years, most dinner parties degenerate into like paired conversations around the room, and every once in a while they open up to the whole table. And to me, that's kind of an emblem of like that. Actually, there's nothing social about social media. To me, it's almost anti-social media, in that it's kind of turning everything into singular, sequential, like a shift away from a spatial way of engaging the world and more towards like a linear or chronological of like one-to-one and one-to-one and then one-to-one versus kind of big full circle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. It brings to mind, there was an article, I can't remember in which newspaper now, because I feel like the media is all sort of merged together.
Yeah, everything's one big blur.
one big, onslaught of conversation, talking about how there is still a kind of devoted group of people that have been engaging in Second Life. You remember the platform Second Life that sort of launched like 15 years ago, where you'd have an avatar and you'd be wandering around in this three-dimensional space, and there were people were building islands, and there were like dance clubs in Second Life and things like that. And so it was very much a kind of game for the mundane and the quotidian, but somehow it's come back to the present as people try and figure out new platforms and new modes of engaging in something more than the kind of talking head environment, just the reduced audio visual, and what you said about the spatialization of communication, I think is really interesting. And of course, our overlords at Facebook, of course, want everybody to put on their VR helmets and and to be able to have that spatial commitment, from the sanctity of your own bubble. And maybe that'll create a whole new dimension of engagement. Are you worried about LA? Are you concerned about the artists and the galleries and the street level culture in Los Angeles?
Oh, yeah, but in a way, no more than I'm worried about global warming, running out of oxygen, and running out of water. I worry about a lot of. LA is my habitat or my immediate environment, and it's I think it's gonna go through some big cataclysmic shifts. I mean, I think I just like riding my bike around town. I look at how many restaurants are shut, and I don't know, how they're ever gonna come back. And I think the same with galleries. I think even a lot of museums are not gonna come back. I think colleges all the country, all the arts ones might just go bankrupt too. So I think there could be like a giant.
Uh-oh. Looks like we might have just lost David. Hold on 1 second while we see if we can get him back. I think we lost you for a second there.
Everything completely disappeared.
You said bankrupt,
But,
and the folks at Zoom decided that was too pessimistic, and so you were shut down.
The NSA shut me down. Yeah. So did you get the part where I was talking about restaurants closing?
Yes.
And I think the universities and colleges also closing.
Yes.
Yeah. And so and I think that it might be just kind of like this, like gigantic forest fire of things we've come to think of as ordinary and life as we know it, and that'll be bad and difficult and painful and tough. But I think other things will spring up in their place, and I think I don't know what they'll look like, but I still think it's so early in this. I think it's a species problem, and I think species are really, really clever things and protect themselves. So I think like a lot of the individual components of the species will, may not make it. But I think that as a whole, the species will figure it out. And I do think we'll be able to, go back in public with immunities. But I think there'll be another bug that could do this. But I think it actually might get us to start to think in terms of the governments not just working in terms of nations or of special interest groups or as classes, but maybe in terms of humanity. And then that might actually slow down global warming, slow down overpopulation, get clean water to people that don't have clean water, and things like that. That's my optimistic way of looking at it.
No, I think that I'm in a certain amount of agreement with you on that point. If only to approach it from a more cynical angle, which is that the demonstration of the interconnectedness of the economy at the very least means that these nations have to begin to think about one another in a little bit different set of terms, rather than the way that they've been approaching it thus far. And so maybe that bleeds over into better and more robust international policy and agreements. Of course, the opposite is also very possible, where we are reduced back into a kind of nationalisms and people retrench behind their boundary lines.
Oh yeah, I lost you a second at the end, but I think, Jonathan, I mean, it could become kind of medieval in elite fortresses with like great high-tech stuff and air filters and water purifiers in their little enclaves, and the rest of kind of the Mad Max world out there. But so like my head will follow either of those scenarios, all the way to the end, and it's it's entertaining, and you can see possibilities. But I really hope.
I look forward to seeing the art that is produced out of both of those environments.
Yeah. It's actually the thing of getting back to your kind of like feet on the ground in the grassroots or in the weeds level of art in LA. I've been talking to quite a few artists, and kind of the consensus I've gotten from them is almost kind of like this, like a sense of guilty pleasure in what the quarantine has produced for them, because most of the ones I've talked to have been spending more time in the studio. They feel a lightening of the burden of social responsibilities in terms of like showing up at other people's openings and standing around saying nothing, and all that social side of art, and that gets you stuck in traffic and gobbles up time, and endless lunches where nothing gets discussed or nothing gets done. And the artists I talked to were really, enjoying being freed of those obligations to have more time in the studio, more self-reflection, more introspection, more time for work. But then they also felt a little bit guilty about it in terms of like, they didn't by any means want to suggest like, I'm glad that the coronavirus is here because it gives me more studio time. That wasn't what it was all. It was like that's a tragedy, that's a trauma, horrible stuff is happening. But the studio side is pretty good. And I actually think that there's most artists are actually introverts that happen to be in a career that requires an extrovert component, and maybe they had felt that constant tug between those two is exhausting, and now they're just kind of almost like being on vacation from normal social responsibility, and not like big social responsibility, like just like this,
Sure.
the responsibilities of decorum and civility, and they're free stuff. So they actually were. It wasn't like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't have friends to talk to. They talk to the ones they care to, but they spend most of the time with themselves. Yeah. So that might produce just more great work. But then who knows what the media will focus on and what will get legs and traction and how it'll develop. I'm actually surprised by how much people are already like wondering how it's going to change everything, or how it. I'm fine with wondering how it's gonna, but I'm suspicious of people that think, well, how has it changed things? And to me, it's like, Jesus, it's only been 3 weeks. It's like,
yeah.
But the oil paint's even dry.
But I think that 3 weeks has felt like 3 months. Man. Like the way that the time has dilated has been kind of extraordinary. And so, and I think even as you're describing it, I mean, that time in the studio, I'm sure that after sort of 3 or 4 days of this newfound sort of opening where there isn't an art fair, there isn't an exhibition program or something that an artist has to attend to in order to accompany the discourse around their work or to help the commercial enterprise around their work or whatever it is, 3 days in the studio uninterrupted without any of those external things impinging must seem like an eternity. Right. And then so on the one hand, I agree with you, it seems like it's a great boon. And then I'm wondering at what point the crack-ups begin, because all of a sudden everybody has to pass through the kind of moment of reckoning with themselves or with their work, the same way that any writer or anybody else does, of having to actually sort of confront what is it that I'm engaged in doing? What is the project? How am I going to communicate this thing in a meaningful way?
Exactly. It's exactly that communication part, because it's like you may be making great work, but if you're putting it in your closet and closing the door, that's really not communicating.
The ultimate underground. What I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'm gonna solicit from our guests on the line to put some questions into chat, and I will help mediate those for David. But in your capacity as an educator, I know you've been talking with a lot of artists who are out there and have built their careers, but also you're working with people in our MFA program and others who are sort of looking for a level of engagement and a level of community. How has that been to navigate, and what are some of the transitions and some of the things that you've been seeing or you've been doing to try and help that process along?
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue and problem, and to me, an online studio program is a contradiction and is a problem, and to me, it's like switching from what we had been doing at CGU in the studio, see them in the hallway, hang out with your colleagues, hang out with your peers, see each other's work on a daily basis, have face-to-face meetings, to suddenly abruptly stop that and shift to it's online only is a big challenge. And to me, it's fine for a stopgap measure. It's like, okay, virus is out there, it's too dangerous to be in public, go underground for a bit, retreat. To me, it's okay for a stopgap measure, but for long term, it's like it's not a way to run a studio program. I think it is the academic side shifts much more easily. Like my writing class has been effectively no different. It's a little bit different in structure, but in terms of preparation, content, discussion, and realizations that get delivered, that's not each one works well. It's not a problem. What I'm interested in is seeing which parts of shifting to online actually make me rethink how I had done things before, and that's starting to happen. So there's a cool learning curve component to it. The students I meet with who work in photography are much better off than the ones who work in painting, because they can send me a slew of images and they come through pretty well online. Same with video. But you do miss that kind of zoom in and jump back and pop around from one work to the other one. But the ones who are prepared and send images, the meetings are pretty good. But it's a different kind of programming. And to me, it's there are low res programs that are around the country that are actually really, really effective. They're set up different ways, and they can work really well. But to me, there's still nothing like this, one building with a
Uh-oh. David, come back. I'll try and get David back here.
This has never happened.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
My back, yeah.
Yep, you're back.
I don't know when I disappeared from you guys, but I was saying that what I really miss is the kind of the unpredictable spontaneity of bumping into people and having conversations just pop up and flourish.
Right.
That's also what I miss from a newspaper, where you would you get the physical thing and you focus on the article about one subject, and then in the corner you see one that's completely unrelated, and like, oh, I'm interested in that too. And I find myself not finding those things online because I go to what I'm interested in and follow down the rabbit hole of my interest. So to me, there's like a shrinking of, or an elimination of accidental discoveries that we're living through.
Yeah, or a different kind of accidental, right? Everything has a kind of process of kind of click through and the old analogy of surfing the web, right? But it's like you're always heading in one direction versus the other sort of lost art of going to the library stacks and coming upon something in the vicinity. I'm always brought back to David Bellamy's discovery of the rolled lead in Richard Serra's studio and saying, hey, what's that? And he's like, oh, I'm using that for plumbing with Philip Glass. And he's like, well, that's actually kind of interesting, that rolled piece of lead sitting over there. So, those, the rest is history. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes out. Yeah. So I've got some chat questions coming in. So the first one, so words of encouragement or advice for some of the students who are graduating into this set of conditions in the coming month.
I always find it presumptuous to give words of wisdom or even advice. I'm fine with encouragement, and to me, it's like just be really flexible. And it's a grim situation. It's tough. There's challenges, but don't let that set your whole agenda. And try new stuff. If it, if this is the way you always did something and that's been going great for you, well, you can't do that now. So try something else, and it might suck, but you might actually discover something good. And it's like you kind of have no choice. Like the world is like it is, and if you want to, roll over and play dad, that it wins. But if you want to, have a life that's a little more interesting, like improvise, adapt, make something up. See what happens.
Yeah, I think that is good advice.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, I think that given the uncertainty of the horizon, I mean, I think it's still, we know we will come out the other side of this. We don't know what conditions will be in place and what will have changed fundamentally, but we know it's not going to be catastrophic. There's a capacity to come out the back end. But in some ways, everybody's well-laid plans or expectations for themselves, or interests in how they wanted to see themselves or their careers or their develop, is frighteningly, but also kind of blissfully put on hold, right? And perhaps made either irrelevant or it needs to take a back seat to another set of values. It's kind of a bad segue into the next question that came up on chat. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I think it's interesting. So how does what's happened change, in your opinion, the very structure of what is, I would say, meaningful or irrelevant? And there are a couple references in here, but I'm gonna leave it there before getting into the Sartrean and the Macintosh references. But maybe
So how does this change what's meaningful? Yeah.
Or think about it. I mean, when you had a set of coordinates, I think, as a critic. So I'll speak to you as a critic. So when you and there is, obviously there's a heavy not burden, but a lot of store set by the actual experience of a thing in 3 dimensions in real time. But there was also and translating those experiences into what made something compelling or interesting or worth attending to. We can't, obviously not everything that one experiences in 3 dimensions in real time is as interesting or as relevant or as meaningful as something else. And has anything in the current condition sort of reshuffled or realigned the way that you think about assigning what was important in those experiences, and what else do you need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I would say, like, in terms of like the big, profound, deep human questions we bring to art when we really care about it, those haven't changed at all. But the format or the structure or the form of that is going to change a lot. So like ultimately, I think people look to art to like sort out their emotions and find what they really care about and really believe in. I don't think that part is going to change, but the forms by which we do that are going to change a lot, and I don't know yet how. And there's I think we're humans are really, really creative and genius people. Artists are especially acute and sharp at those things. I think stuff will change, but I still think that people will look to art to kind of organize their emotional lives and their relationship to their surroundings in a way that's meaningful to them. I don't know how much I mean, it's changing now, but I don't know, how to say how it's changing.
Yeah. I'll leave that there. And I'll move on to one of the other questions. I think that this, though, is a very interesting thing to pursue, because part of it goes towards, taking more seriously, I think, the intentions of the artists and the expectations for what the work is meant to either communicate or to try and get across. There'd been a long period of time where artists had put their work into the world and then succumb to the idea that it's the viewer, the audience, everybody can interpret it how they want, and it's supposed to be different things for different people, and you want to cultivate that kind of thing. and I understand that, but I think that it pushed too far in that direction because,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it can't be everything to all people. And you don't
Right.
hope that everybody, like as an artist, if you're being honest about what you want your work to be about, if it's meant to be meaningful, you want to have, you've got some intention for it, right? You're after a certain kind of quarry. And I think too much was ceded to the audience. I'll be interested to see how this goes forward. Anyhow.
Oh, that's interesting, Jonathan. I think too much was ceded to the artist.
Oh, really?
I'm an intention foe. Yeah. Ultimate to me, it's communication, and communication has it's a two-way street. There's someone talking at one time, someone listening, there's a feedback situation. So to me, it's got to be a balance. I think that graduate education in America cares too much about intention because you're in graduate school, you're making stuff, you got to talk about this stuff, so your attentions count for a lot. And to me, like, art doesn't really start to matter until it goes out in the world and other people look at it and other people respond to it and other people care about it, from all levels of the market to different social groups. It's never, it can be anything you want it to be. I've never never thought about that. I think art's way stronger than that, and it's like it tells you, like, no, I'm this set of concerns or this set of issues, and you better get that, or you're just a stupid viewer. And I just think that in a grad program, people make all this wonderful stuff, and it's just like it hasn't gone out in the world and done anything yet, so people fall back on talking about what they want it to do. And to me, I think the most interesting works over time may not involve what the artist clearly intended. So I go for the social. And being a critic, of course, I'm not going to cede my power of being the viewer saying what the work is about to some chump artist who thinks that their work is about something else. It's what I think. But then when I say what I think, I'll write that down, and and then I'll give that to you, the reader, and say, like, well, this is what I think. What do you think? You say, well, you're half right, and you'll say something else. And to me, that's the communicative enterprise that's interesting.
And I agree, and what I appreciate that I think we're absolutely in agreement. But it is, you are in some sense making an effort, quarreling over what you think is right about the work. Right? What is meaningful about the work, and what is important about the work? And so there is some agreement at a level that there is. It's not that like, this is what it means to me, and so I take my opinion and I walk away, and you can have your opinion, and we the phrase that drives me crazy is this, like, agree to disagree. It's like, no, you either disagree or you agree, and it's like, and you've got to fight to get to one side or the other, and disagree.
Right. If you really, really care about it, it's like it isn't okay if other people think it's something else. And then there's this kind of, and that's where the social excitement comes. Like, then you got to convince me that my view was wrong. And you do that, you don't do that by picking up a stick and beating me to death. That's not how culture works. You have to be persuasive, charming, smart, insightful, articulate, and then I have to be that back. And that's what civilization is. And it can go over and over and over again. Like, you think that this work by this rolled lead piece means one thing, I think it means something else, and like, we both care about it, so we're going to keep going over it, and it's going to be like confrontational but respectful, and aimed at discussion and intellect and passion. But it's not. It's like that's what we do as civilized critters, not fundamentalists who then just like check it off and kill.
Right. Or just categorize and disregard.
It's like, painting
fits into my box, doesn't fit into my box. So I think everyone is expecting that going forward there's going to be a lot of online exhibition making, a lot of shows designed to be shown online. it'll be interesting to see how that develops. What are your opinions so far? Have you spent any time looking at some of the things that the museums or other institutions have tried to put together in order to feed the needs of their audiences? Has some done it better or worse? What are your thoughts on that front?
I'm really impressed at how fast museums are scrambling to get better online presences, and there's loads of stuff out there. I think that the ones that are the least interesting are just trying to like take what they were doing and kind of plunk it over here and translate it.
Yeah.
And I think that my relationship to online info has been as like a guide or an invite to present information about stuff I should go out and see in the world. That may be changing to like, no, it has to be interesting here on my screen. And I haven't seen any that have, really, really done that where I get excited to do it. I still treat online info as like an announcement to go see something I should check out. But I'm sure that people will figure out how to make the screen captivating. To me, it is suited from like I've watched short videos that I haven't minded at all that it's been this big. There's other stuff where it's like, I do really want to see the big screen.
Has that in any way sort of made it into your writing? Have you felt the need to address how the technology or the platform is part of the medium, is part of the exhibition, is part of the work itself? I think right now we look at a lot of these as kind of neutral to what they're trying to channel across. But we know that, at least I'm pretty convinced that most artists are that take at least seriously what these modes of presentation, what these channels are, and how it affects or how it's incorporated into their work.
Yeah, that's coming. I'm thinking along those lines. I organized an 8-artist show for the Parrish Art Museum called Telling Stories, which was going to open May 3rd or 4th, and it's not happening. And so we're trying to shift it to an online presentation, and I want to take the structure of what the medium and make the show different, not just like, oh, we can build a virtual museum and hang virtual art and have people virtually walk through it. To me, that's the kind of the least interesting way to do it. So we're actually trying to, how do you use the strengths of the medium to convey to use them as strengths and not as weaknesses. It's tricky.
It is tricky. I mean, it's all, these are all interesting ones. I'm gonna combine that with another question. How would you suggest an artist do a virtual studio visit? Right, like as part of like part of like the professional context that artists are sort of and assuming that not everybody is a photographer or video where you're going to simply send in a bunch of JPEGs and what are some, I mean, to the extent that you've had any experience doing this, what do you think are like better or worse practices for doing a kind of virtual studio visit over Zoom or FaceTime or something like that?
Yeah. Oh, so for me, the number one is like make work and then make more work and then make more work and then take pictures of that work and then send it to the person you're going to be meeting with ahead of time and then sit down and talk about it. And to me, that's still one where the structure is there's this world out there, what the Second Life that is where something interesting is happening, and we're just using this medium right now to talk about it rather than meeting in person. And that's not the model of it. Like all that we have left is a screen. How do you make work on screen?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's Nancy Baker Cahill, who's been doing these great augmented reality and virtual reality works. She had set up she's got an app called Fourth Wall, and one of the options is to basically do a kind of virtual walkthrough of her studio. And it seems like that could be a very interesting for a lot of people to use. If it's like, I think it's quite cumbersome right now to try and capture that, but it's like if there was some technology by which you could essentially get almost like a 3-dimensional instantaneous picture of your studio environment and then somebody else can kind of use their cell phone or use VR glasses and be able to walk through it and make that an easy experience. That might be a way of navigating this going forward. Another question coming for you. We've got this is a deep one. There was a writer who quoted Pascal saying, quote, "All of human unhappiness comes from one single thing, not knowing how to remain at rest in a room." What do you think about that?
There's a lot to that. Yeah.
That's the intellectual precursor to the mindfulness movement that wants you, wants you to have a calm mind, and keep going. Somebody's asking about advice on the online studio visit because you cut out briefly. If you could just repeat that.
Oh yeah. So
make work.
Step 1 is make work. Step 2 is make more work. Step 3 is make even more work. Then take pictures of that work and send it to the person you're going to be meeting with, and be prepared to discuss it. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And cross your fingers and hope that one day they'll actually be in your studio.
That's right. All right. I'm going to say that as we get towards the end of the hour, I'm going to say thank you very much, David. That was fantastic. And thank you all for joining. Thank you for your questions. And join us next week, Tuesday and Thursday again next week. We'll be sending out announcements with the participants for our conversations going forward. Really appreciate your time. David, as always, good luck. And I look forward to seeing you in the flesh again as well.
Me too.
Okay.
And thanks a lot for inviting me, Jonathan. I really enjoyed it.
No problem. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good week.